Code on Time apps come built-in with a calendar view presentation when your data entities have date fields. Let's learn how to configure a sample to render a calendar and add a custom crate form to create recurring events. First things first, we'll want to define the shape of our data entities. In SQL Server Management Studio, I've created a new database called Meetings. Let's go ahead and add a few tables. First, we'll start with users. Every user will have an ID, a username, and a password. Make sure to mark user ID as a primary key and auto-incrementing. Next, we'll add a list of meetings. Every meeting will have an ID, title, description, start date, end date, created by, and room ID. Next, let's create rooms with room ID, name, and location. And finally, we'll have a list of participants for every meeting. Let's link up all our foreign keys. And save the diagram. Next, let's create our project. We'll give it the name Meeting Manager. And we'll connect to our database. And let's create models for all of our database entities. Starting with meetings, sorting in descending order by start date, rooms, in ascending order of name, users, ascending order of username, and participants, ascending order of username. Let's configure our minimal custom membership. We can remove the roles and user roles table definitions, as well as taking out the email column from users. On the Features page, switch to Ease Configuration. And let's set up our Created By field. First, initialize the sample audit field map. And let's only leave Created By User ID. And we'll map that to the Created By field. Let's go ahead and generate our app. Let's go ahead and log in. By default, it'll show our meetings in a list presentation. We can create new meetings. And create rooms in line. We can also view our meetings in a calendar presentation. We'll want to configure the end date field, as well as make some additional optimizations to our app. Open the Project Designer. Under the Meetings controller, let's tag Grid 1 as View Style Calendar. This will ensure that users see the calendar presentation when they first visit this page. Next, tag the End Date field as Calendar End. This will configure this field as the end date for events in the calendar. This gives us the ability to easily modify the start and end date of various meetings. If we were to see our app now, we can see that it shows us the length of the meeting, and we can adjust the endpoint as necessary. As well as adjusting the start point, we'll adjust the end date automatically. We can also create new meetings with the start and end date configured automatically. Next, we'll want to set up a new business rule to make it easy for our users to create meetings. Create a new business rule. This JavaScript business rule will run after the command new. First, we'll set up the title of the row to New Meeting. If the start date has not been set by using the Quick Create feature in the calendar view, then we'll take the current time and move it to the beginning of the next hour. We'll set the end date to be 1 hour past that. Finally, we'll set these values to the start date and end date field values. Let's try out our business rule. If we create a meeting using the calendar view, we can see the title is automatically pre-configured to the value New Meeting. The start and end date have been set automatically. If we use the plus icon, you can see that it'll create a meeting at the start of the next hour, and the end date will be an hour after that. Next, let's go ahead and add the participants many-to-many lookup. Let's create a new field under Meetings controller. With the name Participants. We'll give it an item style lookup. Items data controller of users, and target controller participants. We'll bind this field to each view in Meetings. Let's try it out. If we create a new meeting, We can now select which participants will be part of the meeting by using the drop-down list or by searching for a user. Notice that the events in the calendar have colors. We'll want to configure our room ID field to be the provider for those values. Double-click on the room ID field under Grid 1 and specify the tag calendar color. Let's see how that looks. Notice that the color depends on which room that a certain meeting has. If we create a room 3, it will now have a third color. We would like to add the ability for our users to add meetings on a specific schedule. The first task will be to add a table of schedules. Each schedule will have the days of the week that the event will be repeating on, and the number of weeks it will repeat for. Finally, we'll optionally bind each meeting record to a schedule. Let's go ahead and refresh our database schema. And let's add the schedule to our models. Under Meetings model, let's add Schedule ID field, connect Schedules table, and borrow both fields. Let's make sure to clear the automatic alias from Schedule ID. And save the model. Next, let's add a model for Schedules data entity. If we generate the app, we can see that the borrowed fields will appear in the create form of meetings. Let's go ahead and create two create forms, one form to rapidly create one-off meetings, and another to schedule recurring meetings. In the project designer, let's make a copy of Meetings Create Form 1. And we'll give it the name Create Meeting. We'll mark the Schedule ID field on Create Form 1 as hidden. And we'll remove the other two schedule fields from Create Form 1. We'll want to mark Schedule ID as hidden in the Create Meeting view. Next, let's go ahead and configure a custom new action that will trigger this Create Meeting view. Under Action Group AG3, let's create a new action. With the command name new, command argument create meeting, with header text new recurring meeting. If we were to view the app right now, we would see the second create action when tapping in the calendar view. Next, we'll want to set up our form so that our user can specify a recursion pattern for their meeting. Under the Meetings controller, let's configure scheduled days of weeks to be a checkbox list, and we'll enumerate several static items by right-clicking and pressing New Value Text Item. And we'll add the days of the week. Let's mark the Schedule Days of Week and Schedule Weeks fields as virtual and editable. Next, we'll need to write a custom business rule to handle the recursion. Add a business rule to Meetings. This code business rule will run before the command insert. To help us with writing the code, let's enable data access objects on Meetings and Schedules. Go ahead and generate the app. Once generation is complete, let's open the business rule in Visual Studio. First, we'll check to see if the user has specified the days of the week and the number of weeks to repeat for. If so, then we'll provide our custom implementation of the insert. First, we'll create a schedules record based on the values provided by the user. The insert process, if successful, will set the schedule ID of the schedule object. We'll go ahead and assign that to the current meetings record. And then we'll call our procedure to create scheduled meetings based on the schedule. Let's go ahead and write that now. First, we'll take the days of the week and break it up as a comma-separated string. And then let's figure out the start of the current week. Finally, we'll figure out the duration of the event. And then we'll iterate for the number of weeks specified, creating a new meeting on the specified days of the week. If the calculated date is past the template meeting start date, then we'll insert the meeting. We'll need to make sure that we'll add 7 days for every week that we iterate on. Let's go ahead and drop a breakpoint and try it out. Let's create a new recurring meeting that'll happen Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays for the next 3 weeks. First, we check to see if the user has specified the recursion. It looks like they have, so we'll create a new schedule object and insert it in the database. Now that we have it there, we'll create the scheduled meetings as necessary. First, we grab the days of the week in a list: Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Then we'll figure out the start of the week based on the start date, which in this case is the 6th of October. And then we'll figure out the duration, which is equal to 1 hour. For each week that we've specified to recur, we'll create the events on those days of the week. The first one being Monday. It does happen on or after our first event, so we'll create that new meeting and specify the schedule ID. Next, we'll try Wednesday, and we'll go ahead and create a meeting for Wednesday. And we'll create a meeting for Friday as well. And now we'll move on to the next week. And we'll create meetings for the relevant days of the week. Let's see what happened. We can see that we have our one-on-one with Steve every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for the next 3 weeks. And there's no events on the 4th week. Notice that we can continue to make one-off events using the standard create action, without specifying any sort of schedule. The next thing we would like to do is for our user to be able to delete sets of recurring meetings. Let's add a business rule on delete. This code business rule will run before the command delete. Let's go ahead and create the file by generating. Once generation is complete, we can flip back to Visual Studio. You may need to refresh the Solution Explorer to see the new file. If the schedule ID has a value on the current record that we're deleting, then we'll stop the standard delete action. Ensure that the form continues closing, as the user would expect, and we'll execute a SQL query against the database to delete all meetings that have the same schedule ID and that start after the current instance start date. Let's go ahead and try it out. Let's go ahead and delete our third one-on-one. We can see that schedule ID has a value for this record, so we'll execute our custom query and continue. We can see that the 2 previous one-on-ones have not been deleted, but the one we selected has, as well as any subsequent records. Finally, we would like to modify recurring meetings when the user changes the recursion pattern. First, we'll want to clean up Edit Form 1 on meetings. We'll mark Schedule ID as hidden. The other two schedule fields we'll only want visible when Schedule ID is not equal to null. We'll add a visible when expression. If we were to view the form, a non-recurring meeting will not show us the schedule fields. A recurring meeting will show us the schedule fields. Next, let's add a business rule before update that will process our changes. This code business rule will run before the command update. Go ahead and generate. When generation is complete, refresh the solution and modify the R103 file. If the schedule ID has a value, then we'll prevent the standard update, ensure the form closes, and we'll go ahead and delete all the subsequent meetings. Notice the use of the old value for start date. The old value is used because that's the value that's currently in the database right now. If the user were to modify the start date, we would be setting the new start date on any new records that we create. Next, we'll create a new schedule and we'll insert this schedule. And then we'll reuse our method that we created previously to create the scheduled meetings. Let's see how it works. Let's modify our one-on-one with Jane. We'll switch it to a different room and repeat it for 3 more weeks. We can see this record has a schedule ID value, so we'll delete all the subsequent meetings, create a new schedule, and create all the scheduled meetings based on the schedule we defined. You can see that all the follow-up meetings with Jane are now in room 2.